Since the dawn of time, humanity has been fascinated with what lies beyond. Not just the meaning of our own existence, but what exists outside our world. When we look up into the night sky, we're staring into an ocean of stars, planets, and galaxies, stretching farther than the human mind can truly comprehend. And even then, with all our technology, all our telescopes, and all our exploration, we've barely begun to scratch the surface of what's out there. For centuries, one question has lingered in the back of the human mind. Are we truly alone? With billions of galaxies and trillions of planets scattered across the universe, the idea that Earth is the only place with life feels increasingly unlikely. And yet, some people believe we may not have to travel across the stars to find the answer. Because every so often, someone looks up into the sky and sees something they can't explain. I'm Van Holsing, and you're listening to Life, the Universe, and Everything in Between. Here's a question. Are we really so arrogant that we believe that we're the only beings in this entire universe capable of exploring space and the great beyond? We've explored less than 5% of our own oceans. In fact, we have better maps of Mars than we do of the ocean floor here on Earth. So who's to say that there isn't some life form out there more advanced than we are? Something with technologies beyond our understanding, materials that don't behave the way our physics say they should. It's just a thought. I've always been fascinated with the stars and the endless possibilities of what might exist out there. Growing up with shows like Star Trek, Star Wars, and even E.T., it was easy for the imagination to run wild. But there were also darker stories too, movies like Alien, Invasions of the Body Snatchers, and the one that terrified me the most, Fire in the Sky. That movie stuck with me because of one simple line, based on a true story. But we're not here diving into the Travis Walton abduction today, because this episode isn't about something that happened hundreds of miles away. It's about strange, unexplained events that happened much closer to home. My first experience seeing something truly unexplainable in the sky happened when I was 16. It was a warm summer night, and we were playing jailbreak, a form of hide-and-seek for those who don't know. There was a soft breeze in the air, just enough to take off the edge of the heat. Crickets filled the night, and the smell of freshly cut grass drifted through the yard. We'd played for hours. The moon and stars were our only light, aside from the beams of the seekers' flashlights cutting through the darkness. Sometimes we'd hide behind a patch of grapevines where the air smelled sweet from the fruit hanging on the vines. We'd lay in the grass, staring up into the vastness of space while we waited for the seekers to find us. It was a typical summer night, just like any other. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. The moon was bright and full, casting pale light across the ground. My friend and I were hiding in our usual grapevine spot. Part of the reason I picked that spot was because I liked staring up into the night sky. We had been there for a while without getting caught, which was unusual for us. Normally, we would move around constantly to stay ahead of the seekers. But that night, something happened. Both of us had seen something neither of us had seen before. A giant fireball of light. It was about twice the size of the sun as it appeared in the sky. It made absolutely no sound, and trailing behind it was a strange greenish glow. I still have no idea what it was. I've never seen anything like it before, and I haven't seen anything like it since. Was it an alien craft? I don't know. Was it some kind of cosmic event? I don't know that either, but it was definitely something worth remembering. And speaking of remembering, here's the moment I'll never forget. After what felt like an eternity of staring at it, trying to process what I had just seen, I suddenly sat up straight. I looked at my friend and said, "Did you just?" Before I could even finish the sentence, he sat up too and said, "See that?" And then both of us just started blurting out questions at the same time, trying to figure out what in the world we had just witnessed. Seeing something like that sticks with you. It changes the way you look at the night sky. And over the years, I've realized something. I'm far from the only person who's looked up in the sky and seen something they can't explain. In fact, one of the most famous UFO encounters in American history happened right here in Pennsylvania, December 9th, 1965. It was early in the evening when people across the northern United States began reporting something strange in the sky. From Michigan to Ontario, from Ohio all the way to Pennsylvania. Witnesses described seeing a fireball streaking across the horizon. Some say it looked like a meteor blazing through the atmosphere, but others noticed something odd. The object didn't seem to be falling randomly. Instead, it appeared to change direction as it moved through the sky. Pilots reported seeing it. Police officers reported seeing it. Even air traffic controllers tracked something unusual moving across the radar. As the glowing object traveled east, thousands of people watched as it passed overhead. Many described it as a greenish color, trailing smoke and sparks behind it as it roared through the atmosphere. Eventually, the object descended towards the wooded hills outside a small village in western Pennsylvania, in a town called Kecksburg. Several residents reported hearing a loud crash echo through the forest. At first, people assumed it must have been a plane going down, but when locals started heading toward the woods to investigate, what they found was far stranger. According to witnesses, a large metallic object had come down into the trees. It was described as being roughly the size of a small car, partially embedded into the ground. The shape, many claimed, looked almost like an acorn or a bell. Smooth metal, bronze, or gold in color. But the strangest detail wasn't the shape, it was the markings. Some witnesses said they could see strange symbols etched into the band running around the base of the object. Symbols that didn't look like English, or Russian, or any other language they recognized. Word spread quickly through the small community. Within an hour, locals, firefighters, and curious residents had begun gathering near the crash site. But they weren't alone for long. Before that night was over, members of the United States military had arrived and sealed off the entire area. Military vehicles started arriving. Witnesses reported seeing U.S. Army trucks moving into the area, followed by personnel who quickly established a perimeter around the crash site. Roads leading into the forest were blocked off, and locals who were heading towards the scene were quickly turned away. Some residents claimed soldiers were moving methodically through the woods with flashlights, searching the area as if they were looking for something very specific. Others said they saw men in military uniforms carrying equipment deeper into the forest. Before long, the site was completely sealed off. One local volunteer firefighter later claimed that he briefly approached the area. He caught a glimpse of the object lying among the trees. He described it as metallic and smooth, with a band of strange symbols around its base. But he wasn't allowed to stay long. He, along with everyone else, was ordered to leave the area. Then came the moment that would turn the entire event into one of the most mysterious UFO cases in American history. Several witnesses later claimed that sometime later that night, a large flatbed truck was seen leaving the woods, and on that truck was the object. According to those accounts, the strange acorn-shaped craft had been carefully loaded onto the vehicle and covered with a tarp before being transported out of Kecksburg under military escort. Where it went after that remains unknown. The following day, officials offered a simple explanation. They said that the object people had seen streaking across the sky was nothing more than a meteor that had burned up in the atmosphere. Later explanations suggested it might have been debris from a failed Soviet spacecraft known as Cosmos 96, which had re-entered the atmosphere around the same time. But there was a problem with those explanations. Meteors don't usually change direction in the sky. They also don't leave behind metallic objects the size of a small car. And perhaps most importantly, they don't usually require a military convoy to remove them from the woods. To this day, the official story remains that nothing unusual was recovered from the forest near Kecksburg. But the people who were there that night tell a very different story. And their accounts are the reason the event has come to be known as the Kecksburg UFO incident. Whatever crashed in those Pennsylvania woods in 1965 may never be fully explained. But stories like Kecksburg are the reason why so many people still look up at the sky at night, wondering if one day they might see something they can't explain. Whenever a story like the one in Kecksburg surfaces, it naturally leads to another question. If something truly unusual did crash that night, why would the government keep it secret? For many people who study UFO sightings, the idea of a cover-up isn't just speculation. They believe there are several reasons authorities might hesitate to reveal the truth about an unidentified object or possible extraterrestrial encounters. One of the earliest events that helped fuel the suspicion happened in 1947 in a small desert town of Roswell. That summer, reports began circulating that something strange had crashed on a ranch outside the town. At first, the local Army airfield actually issued a press release saying that they recovered a flying disc. But only hours later, the story suddenly changed. Officials claimed the wreckage was nothing more than a weather balloon. Case closed. But the damage had already been done. The idea that something extraordinary had crashed into the desert had captured the public imagination. That event, now known as the Roswell incident, would go on to become one of the most famous UFO stories in history. And in many ways, it helped spark the modern UFO movement. But there are many other reasons governments are cautious about revealing information about unexplained objects in the sky. Public panic. Nearly a decade before Roswell, in 1938, a radio drama unintentionally demonstrated just how quickly fear could spread when people believed the Earth might be under attack. The broadcast was an adaptation of H.G. Wells' novel The War of the Worlds. It aired as a fictional news report describing a Martian invasion of Earth. The program was produced and narrated by a young actor named Orson Welles. What listeners didn't realize at the time was that it was all part of a radio play. As the story unfolded, some people who tuned in late believed they were hearing a real news bulletin, describing alien machines landing in New Jersey. Phone lines were flooded. Police departments received frantic calls. Some families even fled their homes. The War of the Worlds radio broadcast demonstrated something powerful. When people believe the world is facing something unknown, fear can spread incredibly fast. So imagine the challenge governments might face if they suddenly confirmed that an unknown intelligence had visited Earth. For some officials, the concern might be that the truth could cause widespread panic, or at the very least, massive social disruption. But fear isn't the only possible reason for secrecy. Another theory suggests that if governments have recovered objects from crashes like Roswell or Kecksburg, they might be studying the technology behind them. If an advanced civilization has developed a propulsion system, materials, or energy sources far beyond what we currently understand, that kind of technology would represent an unimaginable strategic advantage. In other words, whoever figures it out first could completely reshape the balance of the power of Earth. And then there's another possibility. What if some of these sightings aren't extraterrestrial at all? What if some of them are secret human technology being tested far from the public eye? Throughout history, governments have tested experimental aircraft and classified weapon programs long before the public knew anything about them. Some of the earliest stealth aircraft, for example, were flying years before they were officially revealed. So it's possible that some UFO sightings could actually be glimpses of experimental aircraft, still hidden from the public. In the end, the truth might not be as simple as aliens or as simple as secret military experiments. It could be a mixture of both. And that uncertainty is exactly why stories like Kecksburg continue to fascinate people decades later. Maybe someday we'll learn the full truth. Maybe the objects that came down near Kecksburg really were nothing more than space debris. Or maybe it was something built by a civilization far more advanced than our own. The universe is unimaginably vast, trillions of planets orbiting billions of stars, entire galaxies drifting through space for billions of years. And somewhere out there, it's entirely possible that life found a way to evolve long before we ever looked up at the stars and wondered if we were alone. Maybe they discovered technologies we can't yet imagine. Maybe they learned how to travel distances that would take us thousands of years. Or maybe, every once in a while, something from a distant universe finds its way here. And if it does, the real question might not be whether we're ready to meet them, but whether we're ready to know the truth. That's all for today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Give me a like and a follow if you did. If you have something you'd like to talk about, or if you just want to say hi, you can reach me at theinbetweenpod.com. And until next time, keep your eyes open for what lies in the in-between.